Hi, this is Pastor Troy Neer of St. Peter's Lutheran Church in Shaker Heights, Ohio, coming at you with another midweek recap of last Sunday's message. Now, we're continuing through the book of Ephesians, and this week we picked up on chapter 4, verse 17, where the Apostle Paul says this, "Now this I say and testify in the Lord, that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do in the futility of their minds. They are darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to their hardness of heart. They become callous and have given themselves up to sensuality, greedy to practice every kind of impurity. That is not the way you learned Christ." Paul has something important to say to us as the church, and that is this, that we have a way of life, a way of living, a way of walking that is different than the world has a way of life that doesn't include God. The world has a way of looking at things, of doing things, and calling it good. There are ways that seem right, that feel right, but in the end, they're not good at all. The book of Proverbs tells us that the ways of a man seem good to him. They seem right to him, but the end of those ways is to lead to death. The world lives in darkness, and ultimately the ways of the world lead not to goodness, but lead to emptiness. They are futile, and they can only be futile because the ways of the world don't lead to Christ, but in fact lead away from him. But Paul says you did not learn Christ in this way. The church father, St. Augustine, in his book, wonderful book, by the way, called Confessions, St. Augustine Confessions has this to say about what Jesus Christ did for us and where we are to find him. He says, "But our very life came down to earth and bore our death and slew it with the very abundance of his own life. And thundering, he called us to return to him in that secret place from which he came forth to us, coming first into the virginal womb, where the human creature, our mortal flesh, was joined to him that it might not be forever mortal, and came as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, rejoicing as a strong man to run a race. For he did not delay, but ran through the world, crying out by words, deeds, death, life, descent, ascension, crying aloud to us to return to him. And he departed from our sight that we might return to our hearts and find him there. For he left us, and behold, he is here." Now, the fact that Christ is here is something that's really exciting, as a matter of fact, because the fact that Christ is here is not anything that we have done, something that he has done. In your baptism, when you were baptized, whether that was in a pool or a font or a river or wherever, when you were baptized, Jesus Christ moved in. When you were baptized, Jesus Christ named you as one of God's own children. When you were baptized, Jesus Christ gave you not just a better way to live, but the way to live, the way that leads into life eternal, because the way ultimately leads to Jesus Christ. One of the things we learn from Martin Luther's Small Catechism is what baptism does, but then we also learn what baptism signifies. And what baptism signifies is that each and every day you put to death the old sinful self, the self that would conform to the ways of the world. You put that to death, and each and every day you rise up to new life in Christ. And how do you do that? Well, surprisingly enough, or maybe not surprising at all, the new life in Christ looks a lot like Jesus himself. The ways of the world, those futile ways that lead to death, they do not apply to you any longer. They cannot, because they don't belong to you any longer. They do not belong to you any longer because Jesus Christ has plucked you out of them and put you into his new life. He's done that through your baptism. And to live in your baptism is to live in that new life in Christ. To walk in his light to walk in His love. I'm Pastor Troy Neyer of St. Peter's Lutheran Church in Shaker Heights, Ohio, where we come in, receive the gospel, and we go back out in the world reaching out with that new life in Christ so that others may know that too. Have a blessed week.